Philip Morris.
Yeah, good morning, Honorable Senator Sharon Gatchalian, Chairman of Senate Ways and Means Committee, and to the honorable members of the committee present here today. My name is Gijs de Best, as you said, a nice last name. I'm the president of PMFTC, the Philippine affiliate of Philip Morris International. And we would like to thank you for the opportunity to give our comments to this important topic of illicit trade, what we discussed today in the hearing. As you know, we have always been strong advocates against illicit as it impacts the local farming community, the government revenues, and the legitimate tobacco industry in its entirety as a whole. And we highly appreciate actually the collective efforts of this administration in fighting illicit trade in cigarettes and vape particularly. I refer earlier to what was mentioned from the Department of Finance, the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the Bureau of Customs, but also the Department of Trade and Industry. That has been very effective. It definitely helped. However, given the magnitude of the problem and the scale of the problem, one can argue that more needs to be done, unfortunately. I just want to illustrate the problem. I just brought a few packs. So I have them here, illicit packs. There are many more. I just have a collection. As you can see, they don't have a health warning. They don't have a tax stamp. And they're sold at 50 pesos, as low as 50 pesos. You know that the tax plus VAT is more than 70 nowadays. So that gives you an indication. I have a pack of Chesterfield with tax stamp, with health warning, which is our lowest price on the market, 140. So I have a 90 peso difference between Chesterfield and an illicit product, 90 pesos. So knowing the price sensitivity of the consumer, you can imagine how appealing these products are for the consumers in the Philippines. I take an example, Mindanao. I mean, the illicit preference or incidence is around between 60 and 70%. Around 70% of retailers are selling illicit products at the moment. And maybe I refer to some of the numbers quoted because they might be important or they are important. As per our numbers or Euromonitor numbers, the illicit incidence on cigarettes was 11% in 2020, 21% in 2024, and that translates in roughly 11 billion cigarettes illicit, 11 billion. If I add then the e-vape or e-cigarette, the vape, roughly 6 billion per Euromonitor. You can imagine the magnitude, 6 billion equivalent. So if I add the two numbers, it's 17 billion. And that alone in 2024, per our estimate, would be a missed revenue for the government of more than 50 billion pesos. The last 4 years combined, roughly 190 billion pesos. So this not only substantially impacted the legitimate tobacco industry, but also importantly, the government revenues. And we saw the numbers, 23% decline in government revenue from legitimate cigarettes and 170 billion, the high in 21, to 135 in 23, to an estimate of 131, I think you showed. It's anywhere between 130, 131. So we see the steep decline. So to address this, what do we need? We need a level playing field. A level playing field where all the industry participants are paying the right tax and are complying with all laws and regulations. Hence, we request this administration for consistent nationwide enforcement of all related laws and regulations, such as the tax code, the vape law, and the recently passed Anti-Agri-Economic Sabotage Act. And this also includes prosecution of illicit traders and bringing them to court. We request this administration to implement and enforce the minimum retail price for cigarettes as mandated by the tax code and the recently passed Anti-Agri-Economic Sabotage Act. We recommend to update the minimum reference price and strictly monitor the compliance by retailers to address the sale of illicit products below this MRP set. We request this administration to address the tax loopholes for vape products. Free-base nicotine tax is much lower than the nic salt tax. For comparison, in per milliliter, you pay 6.3 for a free-base product, 54.6 per ml for a nic salt product. It's 90% difference. To the best of my knowledge, there's no country in the world that makes a distinction between free-base and nic salt and there's no rational either. And it is prone for misdeclaration, because what you see in the industry, people declare the product as a freebase, but in fact are nickel salt. So it's non-enforceable, non-manageable, and a lot of revenue loss as a consequence because there's an under-declaration. We request this administration to encourage and help us on the government-to-government cooperation to stop the illicit inflow of products as well. Per our sources, there's a significant illicit inflow from mainly China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and some others. And to address this, there are a few examples of what we can do, or what we recommend: the stronger border controls, coordination among governments to timely share information and monitor suspicious shipments, joint operations targeting cross-border smuggling networks, capacity building and training for customs and law enforcement officers on best practices to prevent illicit trade, and harmonization of regulations. What I mean with that is, take, for example, Indonesia. In Indonesia, there's no law that requires that cigarettes produced in Indonesia for exports need to comply with the requirements of the destination market. So what I mean with that, if a factory in Indonesia is claiming that they export to the Philippines, there's no law that tells they need to use the health warning of the Philippines or the tax stamp of the Philippines. I know that's not a problem we can address here in this room, but what we do, we heavily engage with our counterparts in Indonesia to set such a law or have such a regulation in place like we have in the Philippines. And your cooperation on this would help. So to summarize, we fully support the prevention of illicit trade in the country. We need full enforcement in a level playing field. This to ensure a sustainable revenue stream for the government, like we discussed, a predictable operating environment for us as an industry, and a much needed protection, and not to forget, of the local tobacco farming community as well. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the Honorable Committee for the opportunity to be part of today's hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deves. Before I also throw some questions, let me also recognize Mr. Silva of JTI for any comments.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman and distinguished members. Good morning, and we thank you for inviting us for this public hearing. My name is Guilherme Silva. I'm rejoining JTI Philippines as of 1st of January after 13 years being abroad. I was here before for 2 years. Japan Tobacco is a multinational company, and our biggest shareholder is actually the Ministry of Finance of Japan. Here in the Philippines, some of our bigger brands are Winston, Camel, and Mighty. We operate 3 companies here. We have a distribution company, we have a manufacturing facility in Batangas, and we also have a business center comprising more than 5,500 employees. We have invested in the Philippines since 2017 alone over $2 billion, being on the acquisition of Mighty Corporation, the construction and further expansions of our facilities in Batangas, and other investments. So Philippines is a key market for us. It's one of the biggest markets we have in the company, and we have many long-term plans that will provide quality jobs in the Philippines and will continue to bring value to the Filipino economy. However, the sustainability of our business depends largely not only of the support from the government. Is it too far? Sorry. Depends largely not only of the support of the government, but also working with our industry stakeholders to successfully be able to fight this alarming growth of illicit tobacco and illegal vapes that we've been seeing in the country. So we believe this here is very timely, and it hopefully will shed a light on this growing threat that these illicit cigarettes and vapings will bring, not only to the government revenue collections, but also to the public health in general. illustrating a bit, we've talked a lot about data, and I'll give the data from a different perspective. If we look at the total volume of the legal industry in the Philippines, 5 years ago in 2019, we used to sell 73 billion sticks. If we look at our numbers for 2024, we're selling 43 billion sticks, so a 44% volume decline. When we look into some of our independent third-party surveys, what we see is that this is not necessarily people quitting smoking, and we saw some of the other numbers highlighting that. But we also see that in 2020, we used to have an incidence of around 5% of illicit products, and this is now up for above 16%. And then again, we saw numbers that shows 19 to, but the trend is the most important factor to highlight. We've heard from different departments on the amount of seizures, on the amount of collections. And it's very true that we've increased a lot the amount of seizures and amount of collections, but that doesn't prevent that this industry is thriving and growing at a very fast pace. Consumers go to these products because they are cheaper. We know the sensibility in terms of affordability for the consumers. And as it was highlighted by my counterpart here, a lot of times these products are not even paying the amount of tax that we pay in our legal products. What's also concerning is who are the people dealing with these kind of products, because these industries also, we know that a lot of times, based on many other illicit studies that we have from other countries, the revenues and profits made in this by these organizations, by these illegal organizations, are fueling terrorism, drugs, and human trafficking. So it has another additional complexity, which is not only we are undermining the legal industry, but these resources and revenues that should be going to other entities, such as the Ministry of Health and to the government, are ending up in the pockets of organizations that can be very detrimental in many other levels. To add to that, we also would like to add that these are products that they don't comply to the same standard of quality and production like the products that we manufacture under the regulation and guidance of all the legislations in the Philippines. So it's very important that we acknowledge also the additional risk that these products might have by being widely distributed. We also see that the government is being challenged with the spread of the illicit vapes. And according to our internal calculations, that industry is already around 4.3 billion sticks in 2024. And according to our estimation, at least half of this volume, so 2 billion sticks, are actually coming from illicit products, worsening even further the losses of the government. We've seen the numbers before, I don't need to repeat, but our collection in terms of taxation came down from 176 billion to now 135 billion in 2023. And this is something that we would like to support the administration